So we're going to jump into scripture. I'm going to read John chapter 6, verses 1 through 14. So as you are able, please stand and join in reading God's word with me. Hear the word of the Lord. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs that he had performed by healing the sick. Jesus went up to a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards them, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for all of these people to eat?" He asked only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than a half year's wages just to buy enough bread for everyone to have one bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will that go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that area, and so they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and 12 baskets with the pieces of barley loaves left over. After the people saw the sign Jesus had performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is come into the world." May God add his blessing to his word. You all may be seated. Of all of Jesus' miracles, there are only 2 that are recorded in all 4 Gospels: the resurrection and this one. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John record Jesus feeding a great crowd of people. Matthew tells us specifically that there were 5,000 men, not including women and children. Since the passage said this was the time of the Passover, families would have been traveling together. So between the men, the women, and the children, biblical scholars estimate there were 15 to 20,000 people that would have made up this great crowd. For reference, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, where the Cavs play, seats 19,432 people. So that's the group that Jesus would have been talking to, the size of the Cavs arena. Imagine organizing, preaching to, and feeding that many people without a sound system, without an organized arena, or without professional basketball players to get everyone's attention. And the disciples, they saw this problem. They said, "Jesus, how do we feed all these people?" "Jesus, we cannot afford to feed this large crowd." They were like, "Jesus, just send them home. That would be so much easier." I definitely understand where the disciples were coming from. When planning a big event, food is the thing I am most excited to pass off. Like, when delegating comes, I'm like, "Here, you do the meals. You figure it out." My mom is Karen Nolan, and it is her spiritual gift to feed a lot of people. Like, she does it well, and she loves it. So it has been a good thing that I can just lean on her. Unfortunately, I think the only reason the teens come on the fall retreat is just because they know that Karen Nolan's going to be cooking. Worship, food. So I get where the disciples were coming from. They were stressed. But here in this passage, it's clear they had forgotten who they were with. They had forgotten what God had already done, and they doubted that they could use what little they had. In the book of 2 Kings, Elisha told his servant to feed a gathering of about 100 men with 20 loaves of bread and a bag of grain. The servant says, "How can I feed all of these men?" And in just a few verses later, we read, "They all ate and even had some left over." Imagine that. Psalm 132:15 says, "God will do more than just provide for his people. He will give them in abundance." A young boy, around the same age of some of the teens, gave up his 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread while standing in the midst of this massive crowd, looking up at all of the adults, trying just to catch a glimpse of Jesus. And then all of a sudden, the disciples, their focus is on him. Perhaps he recalled Elisha's story. Perhaps he just had faith that the disciples didn't. But he gave what he had. I would love to hear the conversation between the disciples and this boy. And what I'd love to hear more is this boy tell the same story again and again and again and again until his grandkids said, okay, we've heard the story enough. With the fishes and loaves, Jesus looked to the heavens, blessed the food, and all were satisfied. Ephesians 3:20 says that our God can do immeasurably more than we could even ask or imagine. All we have to do is offer our fishes and loaves. Zechariah 4:6 says, not by might, nor by power, but by Spirit. It is by the Spirit of the Lord that God can do a lot with our little. 20 teens and 3 adults from North Olmsted Friends Church left for Detroit, Michigan on June 21st to serve with an organization called Praying Pelicans Mission. Each teen and adult on the mission trip had their fishes and loaves to offer, some talents, skills, gifts, just their actions even, and with a surrendered heart, they offered their little so that Jesus could do a lot. The teens did a lot of work that week. They cleaned churches, they weeded gardens, they sorted hundreds of shoes, they painted fences and packed food boxes, all in like 100-degree weather with no clouds. All good work. They did good work. But I'm walking away from that week cherishing the work that God did in their own hearts as they served one another. I witnessed them offer their little by overcoming anxiety, stepping out of comfort zones, and bravely trusting that God would do great things if they simply obeyed. And God did. It was beautiful to watch God take their little and turn it into a lot. I heard so much laughter. I saw friendships where I could not have anticipated. I witnessed them hard at work, probably like their parents never will. But most of all, I witnessed love. Love in the ways that they cared for one another, that they checked in. They were like, hey, did you get some water today? Do you need sunscreen? It was beautiful. Come play the game with us. They saw people left out. They said, hey, come join. I saw them love one another. I saw how the Lord was loving them, and I saw how they loved the Lord. There were seeds planted in their hearts of friendship, confidence, personal growth. And I saw that little, how God did a lot with it. A lot is a little when God is in it. So I had the awesome opportunity this week to go on my very first mission trip with my dad. We got to go on a mission trip together. It was his first mission trip. And it was wonderful, just for me as a human, to have my dad there, not as a pastor, not as a leader, but just as his daughter, to spend that week with him. I knew he was hesitant, but I knew once he got there, he would love the teens, and the teens would love him, and you'll get to hear a little bit about that this morning. So I'd like to welcome my dad, Ron Nolan, to come share his experience with the trip.
Good morning. My name's Ron Nolan, and as she just said, I'm Dad. And as Pastor Adrian said, this was my first mission trip ever in my life. I was one of 2 adults beside Pastor Adrian, the other adult being Mike Rollins. Some of you may know him, and I'm very thankful he was there because he's been on mission trips. And I'm grateful he was there to help me out get through my first mission trip, especially working with the youth. So I'm very grateful to Mike. So when Adrian contacted me and asked me to go on a trip, I was kind of taken aback because, again, never been on a mission trip, wasn't my thing. It's not in my comfort zone, and I was very, very reluctant at first. So I was also a little concerned about how the youth would accept me. They know who I am. They know I'm Adrian's dad, but they don't really know me that well, and I don't know most of them. I know a few of them. So I was rather reluctant regarding that. My wife, on the other hand, they love her, and as Adrian said, my wife's a fabulous cook, so she bribes them with food. So anyway, with all that apprehension, I went, and as the week went on, I just got more and more comfortable, and it turned out to be the greatest experience I ever had. It was wonderful. In fact, I told Adrian the day we got back that, I would do it again. I might come to regret that later, but who knows. Anyway, one of the things that impacted me the most was watching the youth at work. They worked hard. Every day we were in the field working, and like Adrian said, it was 95 degrees out there up in Detroit. I think you had the same weather here that week. So it was very, very hot, and we did a lot of outside work. And I think you can see them painting a fence right there, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But when we're out working, they like to work. They don't like to be idle. Whenever they finish something, they want to know what's next. They want to keep going. And anytime we're at a job site and we needed volunteers to shift gears to do something else, we always had plenty of volunteers. Nobody complained, even though they didn't know what they were going to get themselves into. So the youth, they were fabulous out there. And I tell you this, and I want you to know this, because I know a lot of you, donate your money, to support the youth and to support the mission trip. And I just want to say thank you, and I just want you all to know that it's money well spent. It's not wasted on the youth. They do good work. So with that said, I just want to touch on a few things some of the things we did during the trip, some of the work we did. So on day one, my group, which consisted of about 8 or 9 youth, we stayed at a place called Northline Church. They hosted us. And so on the first day, a few of us stayed back at Northline Church to help them sort through their food pantries and their clothing pantries. Apparently, a week before we got there, they had a little bit of a flood on that floor, so they had to rearrange a lot of their items, not only in the pantries, but in other rooms and stuff like that, to protect everything. So when we got there, the pantries were in a little bit of a disarray. So we spent most of the day sorting out, going through the pantries and sorting through many, many bags of clothes for children and adults. So the pantries, they're maintained by a couple, Debbie, who's 73, and Dan, who's 75. And Dan is the former pastor of Northline Church. And every Monday they come and they stock the food pantry. They've got 3 huge commercial freezers, and by the time they were done that day, those freezers were stocked. You could not get anything else in there. So they go around and they collect the food from local food banks, but they also spend their own money. They go out shopping and spend their own money if the food pantries need it, because every single Wednesday, Northline Church brings in about 20 families to go through the pantries. And that happens every Wednesday, and every Monday, Debbie and Dan stock those pantries. And I want you to remember Debbie and Dan, because at the end here, I'm going to tell you a little story about them. So we spent part of the day doing that, but then part of our crew, a few of us went outside. One of them is here, Ella. She came outside, and we worked on rehanging a chain link fence. I'm sure there's a picture up there. But we were out there for a couple hours rehanging a chain link fence. Apparently somebody had hit the fence with their car and wiped out like 70 to 80 feet of the fence. So we ended up, we were outside doing that for a couple hours. Excuse me. Yep, there we are. That's the chain link fence. So on day 2, there was about 12 of us that traveled to another small church about 30 minutes away called Clinton Valley Church. And this church only has a congregation of about 50 people, including children. So behind the church, on the other side of the parking lot, is a small building. It's the youth center for the youth. And it's a decent size. It's got a kitchen and a restroom and things like that. So the youth pastor is going to, I'll back up a minute. There's also a little house, a little parsonage on the property. And the youth pastor and his future wife are going to move in there later this year. And he needed help cleaning up the property and doing some things like that. So part of our crew was outside, again, working in 95-degree heat, cleaning up wood chips from old trees that had been there, and they grinded up the stumps and just cleaning up some wood piles. And then a majority of us spent, and I think you saw the picture up there of us sanding and painting a wood picket fence. It had been disassembled and taken down, so we sanded it and put 2 coats of paint on it and then stored it in a shed before the rains came, and the youth pastor is going to reinstall it before he moves in. Excuse me. So on the third day, another day, there were 17 of us from our church and from a church in Columbus, Pastor Zach's church in Columbus. I don't know if they're familiar with Pastor Zach, but anyway, and then also one person from Praying Pelicans. We all went to a food bank called Gleaners, and there was about 10 or 12 other volunteers there with us. And Gleaners, again, they're a food bank, and they distribute food throughout the greater Detroit area. They pack up food boxes and distribute that. So when we got there, they put us all in a room and they assigned us all jobs. Some of us labeled boxes, some of us stapled the boxes, some of us packed the boxes, taped them, stacked them. So their process was incredibly efficient. As I was amazed. I've never been in a food bank before. Maybe that's how they all are, but I was totally amazed. And during our shift, and what they do is they bring in a morning shift, and then they'll bring in an afternoon shift. So during our morning shift, we were there for about 2.5 hours, and we packed 814 food boxes to be distributed, which they told us that'll feed a lot of families. So we were rather kind of impressed with assembling 800 boxes in 2 hours. So now if I could come back to Debbie and Dan for a moment, I just want to tell you a little story about them that kind of impacted me a little bit. During our first day there, during some downtime, I had a chance to sit and talk with Debbie. And she was telling me about something that happened to them a long time ago in December. It was 9 days before Christmas. And at that time, they had 3 children, ages 3, 6, and 9. And they were out one evening, and they were returning home, and they found that their house had caught on fire and had burned down, and they had lost everything. So what happened next was really what kind of floored me. The fire investigators investigated the fire and found that it was intentionally set. So they questioned Debbie and Dan to see if they had home insurance, because they were kind of suspecting maybe insurance fraud. Well, Debbie and Dan did not have insurance. However, Debbie was telling me that they did not own the house, they rented the house. And as it turns out, she told me that the landlord did not want the house. He tried to sell it but couldn't sell it. So the fire investigators and even Debbie and Dan knew this, but it could not be proven. But they all knew that the landlord had set the fire, or he was responsible for the fire. So Debbie and Dan are out of a house, and the landlord unfortunately got away with this. So, but what happened next is what transformed their lives. And Debbie told me after all this, she says she wouldn't change a thing. She says, when people found out, they took presents from underneath their tree, gave it to their kids so their kids could have some sort of Christmas. And then over the next 7 to 8 months, people put them up in their house, family, friends, people from the congregation, put them up in their house until they could get back up on their feet. So that generosity and that love and support transformed them and turned them into the people they are today. So God took a devastating event in somebody's life and turned it into a huge positive. Excuse me. So to sum up, to wrap up here, every night when we were done working after dinner, we would all gather in a circle, and not just our church, but Zach's church, and there was a church from Columbus there. They had 10 to 12 people, and the people from Pelican. We would all gather in a circle, and we would talk about what was your high of the day and what was your low of the day. So there were several days where I didn't have a low. In fact, there were several days where a lot of people didn't have a low, other than the heat. That was always a low. But there were days where people didn't have lows. We just had highs. So as it turns out, this turned out to be one of the best experiences I ever had. It was so inspiring, and I was really satisfied with all the work, making new friends, and I was really impressed with how the youth really just go out and work hard. It was very impressive. And one final thought. It was a pleasure being with my daughter. It makes my wife and I proud to see her in her element with the youth and what she does. Thank you.
Good morning, church. My name is Martin Matombo Jr., and this was the first mission trip I've ever attended. Going into this trip, I wasn't expecting to leave such an impact, but looking back, I'm just looking back, and it's just we did so much with so little. For example, the first day, I was assigned to a group where we would stay at the church we were working at. They had a food and clothing pantry, which was filled with food donated by the community. And all we did was just help sorting out frozen goods and just putting away clothes that were given away from the community. And the lady who was with us was thanking us because she said that it usually takes her hours. So that was when I realized why we were here in the first place. We were doing God's work and not looking for validation from others. She expressed her thankfulness, and I was just like, wow, we've done so much. Through the rest of the week, I got close with people I didn't know well, and I was shown God's work in us through the mission trip. The pastor from the church left us with this message. It was an acronym, but he explained us what the acronym meant, which was HOTYF, which means hold on to your fork. This means that if you liked this, there is more to come. And that's how this mission trip felt with me. I'm really glad I got to do this, and I'm really hoping I can do more of this in the future. So this is just the beginning. I'm very glad that I was able to go. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Scott Brewster. I attend the North Olmsted Church, and I help out with the drinks and making the food and best coffees you'll ever have. Take my word for it. Stop by. I'll make you one. But on June 21st to the 27th, I had the pleasure to be able to go to Michigan and help out at Northline, I'm sorry. Lost my place. Being able to help out that church and the community and being able to make a very big impact. I now get to share that pleasure once again to share with you guys. Sorry, I lost my place again. The trip was just amazing. It was just a pure blessing. The amount of games and fun that we had it was outstanding. We got to go to make last-minute Walmart trips, which I'm sure Adrian was very excited about making for those who lost airbags or brought maybe some air mattresses that had holes in them, maybe forgot a toothbrush and being able to shout, "Go Buckeyes," in the middle of a Michigan's Walmart. So we got some very odd stares and hustled out of there very quickly. But to get to the main trip, the theme of it was a lot with the little. And as Adrian talked about in John 6, 1 through 14, it was how Jesus fed 5,000 people, and with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And that was just the men. And I've heard this story many times, whether it was in a daycare or like Sunday service when I was younger. But for some reason, this hit me a lot harder, realizing that the 5,000 was just men, and that didn't include the women or the children. So in total, it was around 19,000 to 20,000 people. And he took just a very little amount of food and made a huge impact, and there's still left over. And we took that mentality into our trip to be able to take with what little we had and to make the biggest impact that we could. And before we even left for the trip, we had a question, and it was, what expectations do you have for here? Sorry, I got a phone call. Stop. It was, what expectations do you have for the week? And my expectation was to expect the unexpected, to not feel like I know what this is going to be like, that I know that I can expect something, pretty much. But I wanted to go into the trip and just have a complete open mind, knowing that God is going to set the way for me, and He is going to lead me through every obstacle that there is. He's not going to let me go astray, and He definitely put that to the test. First day of working, very first day, I got switched to a group. I was going to be with some of my friends from here that I knew very well, and I was excited. But last minute, Adrian put me in a group that we were going to a woman's house where she just lost her mother, and it was her daughter and her were trying to clear out that apartment. And at first, I wasn't too excited about it. I didn't know anybody that I was going with. It was from people from, I think it was Columbus, and I didn't know anyone. I was very out of my comfort zone. And I heard a voice, and that voice said, "Who are you really here for? Are you here for me? Or are you here for you to just have fun and be in your comfortable?" And it brought me back to that same question of expect the unexpected, that there were going to be things that I wasn't going to be comfortable with. And it humbled me extremely. I went back to Adrian, and I told her I was extremely excited to go. I had a complete change of heart, and I was more than ecstatic to be able to go and help this family. Losing a loved one, like a mother or a grandmother, is the hardest thing someone can go through, no matter the age. And having to deal with all their stuff, like just apartments, food, whatever it is, makes that whole process so much more difficult. It doesn't make it any easier with the loss. So being able to be there and see their smiles, make jokes with them, and just seeing their smiles come back to them and just come back alive was it humbled me even more. It just kept bringing me back to the Lord of how I was there to serve Him and His people and not to be in my comfortable. We originally went and we were going to do just non-perishable items, which like just the food and just move out boxes. Should have only been like an hour, but we were able to help clear out their entire kitchen and their entire living room and make their entire moving process so much faster and just put so much stress. You could almost like see it in their faces, how they realized they weren't going to have to worry, that they knew that they had help, they had people to rely on, they had the church, and they were able to just fully trust in God, that they knew He was with them the whole step of the way, no matter how devastating of a event they just went through. He was with them that entire time. But we were able to continue throughout the week, and He was still testing me. He kept bringing me out of my comfort zone to talk to new people, to go up to doors. We did a grill walk, and we went up to doors to offer them to come to like a Hydro Havoc, kind of like a VBS kind of for kids. And he had me go up to a door, and I wasn't going to go up to this door. It looked a little sketchy, but I went up to this door anyways. I knew that if he was having me go up to this door, that there was a reason. And I ended up talking to a mother and her daughter, and the smile on their face that I was able to see when I offered them to come to almost like a party for the VBS for her daughter, and that it was completely free, it was amazing to see that she knew that somebody cared about them and her daughter to be offered to come here. But at the very end of our trip, the pastor ended with this, and this isn't the destination, this is the launching point. This is the point of where we get to see there's more out there, and just like there's the more on your fork, or what was it? I'm sorry. Hold on to your fork. That there's more out there, that this isn't the final destination or the final lesson. This is the first lesson that he has for us to see his wonders, that he's got a plan. He has a plan for me to be able to go out there and work with his people, and I'm extremely excited to be able to do that and work with everybody. But I'm kind of taking this from their plaque on the back of the church, but it said, you've been to church, and now go be the church.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Nee, and before speaking, I'd like to read a small verse from the Word. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward in full. This verse is found in Matthew 6, verse 2. It warns us about speaking and doing deeds of righteousness for the glory of man and not for the glorification of God. I bring this passage up because I believe this is a mindset God desired to put me in for the trip. However, I failed at putting myself in this mindset. Going into this trip, I didn't have the mindset of servitude. Only while on the trip did I recognize my blunder. Yet I still was serving for the wrong reasons. I served for men to witness my deeds instead of for God alone. In a sense, I served for both men and God. But like on the Christian walk, a man cannot walk in both light and darkness. For if he does, he only walks in darkness. Likewise, while I served for the honor of men and for God to be glorified, I was only serving for the honor of men, thus falling short of this mindset God wanted me to be in. This is not to say, however, that God's will was not accomplished. His will was done. People still saw our God move and work. This trip blessed people as well. An example being this. A group from our church consisting of Max, Hunter, Aubrey, Caitlin, Ella, and Marvin went to a small church about an hour from our staying place. There was a youth pastor of the church who lived right next to the church. He was going to move in to his house by the church, but first he had a couple of things to fix up around the property before he could move in. So we helped him pick up wood chips and move rubbish to a dumpster. We helped him paint a fence and more. By doing these tasks, we not only cleaned up the church property, but also moved this youth pastor's move-in date up by 3 weeks. So despite my motives being in the wrong place on this trip, God still did incredible things. This trip made me realize that I serve for the wrong reasons. Now God made me realize that I am to serve solely for the glorification of God, essentially to serve in secret, which is what Matthew 6, verse 2 tells us is good. Because when we serve in the presence of man, we as humans have an inclination to serve, to impress, or to gain from what man can give us. Scripture tells us that those who do this have received the reward in full. They bear fruits that do not express the Christian life. Only when we serve in a selfless manner to glorify God do we bear fruits that show the walk of life. This is what God taught me on the 2025 Detroit mission trip. To serve only for God in secret. To serve only for God in secret is better than serving in a place where man can see the deeds I do and gaining their honor without God being glorified. This trip showed me how God can do awesome things, making the most of what we give him. So I would like to say thank you, church. Thank you, Adrian, for this amazing opportunity of growth and service. God be glorified in all things. Amen. And after a long week in Detroit, go Buckeyes. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ella Wyant. I'm a senior here in the youth group. This mission trip was my last mission trip, my 5th mission trip, and honestly my favorite one, so that kind of works out. I wanted to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for your prayers and all your support, whether it be financially or spiritually. It means more to not only me, but to so many of us, way more than you could possibly imagine. Through this amazing church and this amazing community, I've learned how to appreciate the concept of getting a lot from a little. Each person could give just a little bit, but it truly does go a long way, not just financially, but through all the lives we're able to touch through these trips. Even just one of us going on one of these trips is impactful. However, the multiplier effect of so many of us going could theoretically have an even greater impact. My dad always says that numbers don't count in the great scheme of things, meaning don't go for numbers. Go to impact just one life. Romans 1:16 says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile." Therefore, as long as one life is impacted by the gospel, we have been successful. Your prayers have been successful. Your contributions have been successful. So, again, thank you so much. One thing I wanted to include in my speech to you was how this trip has impacted the gratefulness in my heart. I've always strived to be a more grateful person, and in some ways I've succeeded, but not so much in other ways. This is mainly due to how easy it is for me and probably many of us to complain. Every time I hear someone say, "Man, I just can't complain," I always think, "Congrats, I can." Just think in your heads for a moment. When was the last time you snapped out some aggressive comment towards someone else that you think wronged you? How many of us have complained within the last hour about something or someone? I know I have. That's, I think, the most important things these mission trips have taught me, is to be sincerely grateful. Not just to be grateful for a week and then go back to my complaining life, but to be truly and genuinely grateful for the blessings I receive every second of every day, because even the breath in my lungs is proof of God's goodness. One person in specific that has taught me to have a gracious heart is my best friend, Mickey. That girl has never failed to remind me that there is so much more to life than the bad, and complaining truly doesn't add a single good moment to your life. So for her, I'm forever grateful. As many of you know, there was a heat advisory going on during the week that we were in Detroit. Every night we would meet in this big group, like Ron said, and talk about our highs and lows for that day. And the first day, to nobody's surprise, everyone's low was how hot it was outside, which is completely valid, but despite that downside, the entire week everyone was so positive. I could have complained every single work day about the heat, but everyone knew it was hot, and I would have just only been repeating what everybody knew to be true. And honestly, I don't think I was the only one who realized that, because the entire week, everyone's genuine hearts to serve were so evident, and I couldn't help but feel inspired by everyone. Not just because we're forced to go on these trips and spend a week together, and so it would be best if we got along, but because most of these people are my found family is why I'm so inspired by them. Every one of us has something different to bring to the table, and being able to see those gifts all around me has helped me to remember that God is a master puzzle builder. He puts people together with different strengths and weaknesses and personalities and laughs and gifts together to all accomplish his purposes. All that to say that no matter the challenges we all inevitably face, there's always something to be grateful for. Even if you're unsure about what the future holds, you can be confident in what God's doing because you know what he's done. Thank you so much.